The hard disk drive used to be the most expensive part of a good PC, and it remains a wondrous piece of technology. Magnetically enabled heads literally flying over glass platters, writing or reading gobs of data. How can such a technical miracle also be such a graveyard for profits for years on end? In this video, we look at the birth, boom, and bust of the hard disk drive industry. This video is brought to you by the Asianometry Patreon. Early access members get to see new videos first and selected references for those videos. Early access really helps me a lot, and I appreciate every pledge. Thank you, and on with the show. In 1952, IBM asked a former high school teacher named Reynold B. Johnson to lead a new research lab in San Jose. Johnson was a talented inventor. Early in his life in the 1930s, he invented a machine that could grade pencil-marked multiple-choice tests. Yes, the bubbles. Soon, IBM bought the rights to his machine and hired him. After inventing several new things, IBM asked him to go on out to San Jose and work on some new, interesting projects. Back then, San Jose was a small agricultural city of about 100,000 people. IBM chose to put its new research lab there largely because it was in between major customers in Los Angeles and Seattle. Johnson had wide leeway to hire 30 to 50 people and work on whatever interested him. They took on a variety of projects, but one stood out: a random access processing system to replace something called tub files. Now, I never heard of a tub file before. It's part of a punch card system that very quickly helped you access certain information out of the whole. It worked okay in some use cases, but not so much in others, like invoicing and inventory. Tub files are a form of random access, meaning that we can access any arbitrary piece of information in a sequence at roughly the same amount of time. This is different from sequential access, where you have to cycle through everything in the sequence first to get to the thing you want. When it comes to memory systems, random is often better than sequential. The IBM team decided to explore magnetic recording systems to provide this random access function. A magnetic recording system stores data on some form of magnetic media. A mounted head would then read or write that data off that media. The IBM team evaluated several forms of magnetic media: magnetic tape, magnetic drums, magnetic plates, and even magnetic wires and rods. Johnson eventually used a stack of rotating magnetic disks, with each accessible using read-write heads mounted on a common actuator. He liked this format because of how much surface area it gave you for the size, as well as the potential to access data on multiple disks at once. In an early prototype, they took about 120 aluminum disks and stacked them together on a shaft. Each disk was about 2 feet wide and spaced about a quarter of an inch apart. The whole array spun at about 3,600 times each minute. There were two major technical issues to overcome. First, they needed to figure out how to evenly and smoothly apply the iron oxide paint onto the surface of the disks. One engineer suggested spinning the disks at a high speed and then pouring the paint, the same paint used for the Golden Gate Bridge, by the way, at its center so that it spread uniformly across the whole surface. This technique is now known as spin-on. The second major problem had to do with wobble. The disk will wobble as they spin. How do we keep all the heads at least 1/1000th of an inch above the disk's surface if they wobble? A team led by Bill Goddard and John Lynott integrated an air nozzle into the head, so then we can use air pressure to push air through the head nozzles, creating an air cushion that kept the head stable. Mounted on a single arm, it would move up and down to the right disk to stick the head in. In 1956, IBM introduced the 305 Random Access Method of Accounting and Control, or RAMAC. RAMAC is a transaction processing system built around what is widely acknowledged as the first hard disk drive as we know it. The drive was made up of 50 iron oxide-coated disks, each about 61 centimeters wide. It cost $250,000, held about 4.4 megabytes, and was the size of 2 fridges. These stats might sound ridiculously comedic today, but back then it was an engineering marvel, particularly mechanically, being able to retrieve data in less than a second. In his RAMAC product announcement on September 4, 1956, IBM President Thomas Watson Jr. said that it was, quote, the greatest product day in IBM's history, end quote. Production ramped up in the San Jose factory. The first Raymac was shipped to the Zellerbach Paper Company a short whiles away. In 1959, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev visited the Raymac factory as part of his U.S. tour. IBM made the disk drive a necessary part of the computer, and an industry was born. First, the other computer makers like General Electric and Burroughs started producing their own hard disk drives. Then, independent disk companies, Bryant Computer Products and Data Products for instance, popped up. They offered third-party hard disk drives to those computer makers lacking the expertise or capital to produce their own. During the mid-1960s, Japanese players like NEC, Fujitsu, and Hitachi started producing their own hard drives too. Being vertically integrated players, what they made was only for internal consumption at first. Then in 1966, IBM introduced its 2314 file facility and their disk packs. It not only offered more speed and performance, but its 29 megabyte disk pack format made it easier for people to swap storage in and out. A new wave of independent companies copied the disk pack format and marketed those products to IBM customers as being plug compatible with their hardware. Throughout the 1960s, IBM continued to come out with world-leading innovations in hard disk drive storage. Their crowning moment came about in 1973, when they first introduced the Winchester drive. The name derives from a comment by IBM San Jose manager Kenneth E. Houghton. The original project spec was to have 2 spindles of 30 megabytes each. Houghton heard people calling it a 3030 and said, if it's a 3030, then it must be a Winchester. The project nickname stuck. Up until then, the disks in the packs, or the HDDs, had been removable and accessible. But this accessibility came with particle contamination issues. So IBM sealed off the disks, their individual arms and motors, inside a dust-proof container. This not only fixed the contamination issues, but also enabled the disks to have more storage capacity. That's because it let them cut the distance between the head and the disk surface to 1,000th of what it had been with the Raymac. The closer the head, the more data dense the disks can be. So the Winchester cut the cost per megabyte over competing designs by 30%. The Winchester design became an industry standard. IBM set the blueprint for all other such devices since. For a long time thereafter, people didn't call HDDs hard drives, they called them Winchester drives. One of the guys working on the Winchester's early development was a guy named Alan Shugart. Born during the Great Depression, Shugart graduated from the University of the Redlands and went to work for IBM at the San Jose lab. There, Shugart led various memory projects, one of which was a small, cheap, read-only device for transferring very small programs from one computer to another. IBM called it the Type 1 diskette at its release in 1973, but nowadays we more know it as the floppy disk. Anyway, Shugart would have stayed at IBM his whole career, but then IBM transferred him to New York. He did not want that. So badly, he literally commuted back to San Jose on weekends. Thus, he quit in 1969 and joined a company called Memorex, a memory tape maker, for 3 years. After that, he started his own company, Shugart Associates, but he clashed with his fellow co-founders over direction and equity and left. Shugart Associates went on to dominate the 8-inch and then the 5.25-inch commercial floppy drive markets. Xerox acquired them in 1977 for $41 million. Not a bad exit. After leaving the company with his name on it, Alan Shugart tried some other stuff. Did some salmon fishing, ran a bar or whatever. In the end, he decided to come back to memory and found another company in Scotts Valley in Santa Cruz County. The company's original name was Shugart Technology, but that was too similar to Shugart Associates. So Alan tried to think of a different name, with an S at the start, T at the end, and a G in the middle. He went with Seagate. In founding Seagate, Shugart sought to adapt the IBM Winchester drive for the then burgeoning microcomputer, what we today would call the PC. PC makers had adopted Shugart Associates' 5.25-inch floppy drive. Seagate decided to build a hard disk drive that can fit in the same space but also offer far more capacity. By the way, the 5.25-inch floppy itself came about at the behest of the brilliant Dr. An Wang of Wang Labs. Wang felt that the original 8-inch floppy was too big and expensive and had asked for a cheaper version. Anyway, in 1980, Seagate announced their ST506 hard drive. Its 5 megabytes of storage far outclass a floppy disk's 160 kilobytes of data. Despite being priced at over $1,000 each, the HDD was an immediate hit. The company made $9.8 million in revenues in 1981, and then $40 million and $110 million the years after that. We should take a pause to catch our breath and revisit the technologies behind the 5.25-inch HDD. The core concept had not changed all that much from the days of the floppy disk or RAMAC. There are 4 key subcomponents: the platters, motors, read-write heads, and the supporting electronics. Bits of data are stored on tracks written onto these double-sided platters, which today are made from glass substrates. We mount the platters on spindles and use the motors to spin them 3,600 to 7,200 times per minute. The data is then accessed by the heads, which fly over those platters positioned by actuators. Electronics help position and support these items. They monitor the head's movements as they align and unalign, and they feed information back to the actuators. So yeah, HDDs today work the same way as the RAMAC, but that is kind of like saying that the Ford Model T shares the same core concept as the Lexus LS400. The engineering to achieve the core concept has been completely overhauled. Even that first 5 megabyte Winchester HDD from Seagate was an engineering marvel. Seagate's engineering VP Doug Mahan remarked then that it was like a Boeing 747 flying at Mach 4, just an inch off the ground. And that was back then. Today, the heads fly as little as 3 nanometers above the disk surfaces. Producing these machines requires lots of capital expenditure to build or source the components, assemble them inside expensive clean rooms, and test them before shipping out to the customer. So how did the market turn all this amazing engineering into a commodity? There have been a few reasons. Computer memory, particularly secondary memory, is generally a commodity. The customer always wants more storage and is willing to jump to someone else to get it. Brand value never gained traction in the HDD industry. PC users upgrade their systems because of something new, like a new version of the Windows OS or an Intel CPU. I cannot imagine many people would buy a new PC because Seagate or Quantum released a new HDD. As a result, PC assemblers played each HDD maker off each other, buying whoever met the spec for the lowest price. IBM is notorious for this. They sourced almost all of the HDDs for their rapidly growing PC business in the early 1980s from startups. In 1983, IBM released their PC XT, the follow-up to the legendary first PC. It had a 10 megabyte HDD sourced largely from startups: Seagate, Miniscribe, and IMI. IBM demanded heavy qualification programs and second sourcing from these suppliers. They also refused to enter into long-term contracts that it did not make sense to when the market was moving so fast. So that's from the customer's perspective. Let us talk a bit about piling in. The HDD itself is a modular device. The 4 components are precisely engineered but separate, and only 2 contribute to storage capacity and other performance metrics: the platters and the read-write heads. So, new HDD firms can tweak one of these 2 critical parts to create a new improvement, then integrate those bits and quickly bring a new product to a market hungry for innovation. Furthermore, the HDD firms did not at first protect their trade knowledge and innovations with patents. The community of HDD researchers was small, and ideas flowed freely from one firm to another. But whenever a new firm managed to come out ahead by deriving a new hit format or technology, the competition very quickly pulled together something of their own. That then sucked out any profit to be had. For instance, in 1983, the Scottish firm Rodeem first produced, and more importantly patented, the 3.5-inch HDD format. They were one of the few European HDD startups to be seen as a relative success. The 3.5-inch format did not gain substantial popularity until 1986, when another company called Connor Peripherals started selling it in large quantities to Compaq. The new format's popularity invited massive competition, and Rodeem could not keep up with their competitors' scale and capability. They filed for bankruptcy twice in 1989 and 1991 and evolved into a patent troll, which is sad. Here is a later example. Giant magnetoresistance, or GMR, is a Nobel-winning quantum effect discovered in Germany and France. It revolutionized the HDD's read-write head, allowing for more area density and thus storage. Despite being discovered in Europe, an American firm, IBM, first commercialized GMR in 1997 with a 16.8 gigabyte HDD. American competitors Seagate and Read-Write had their own GMR heads 2 years later in 1999. And then there were the Japanese, who rapidly licensed and bought their own GMR technology. Toshiba announced their first GMR-equipped HDDs in 1998. One of Toshiba's later products was a tiny 1.8-inch HDD. Famously, they had no idea what to do with it, but Steve Jobs and John Rubinstein did, using it for the Apple iPod in 2002. This wave of new firms crashing into the market was funded by a flood of hot venture capital money. The end of the 1970s saw changes in the capital gains tax rates and pension fund investment regulations, which enabled the rise of venture capital, or VCs. Seagate went public in September 1981, a little over a year after first launching their HDD in 1980. They raised $26 million and the market assigned them a favorable multiple. Seagate's VCs made good money. After the IPO, their $1 million investment was worth over $32 million. It paved the way for how VCs would invest and cash out their investments today. By mid-1983, there were 12 VC-backed HDD manufacturers publicly traded on the stock market, and their total market cap was $5 billion. The market was hot, so VCs raised big funds and poured that money into the disk drive industry, recruiting smart people from established companies to found these startups. From 1977 to 1984, 43 different disk drive manufacturers raised $400 million. In 1983 and 1984 alone, 21 startups raised over $270 million over 51 rounds of funding. By then, there were something like 70 firms in total. So when the PC market first pulled back in 1983 and 1984, it triggered a huge shakeout. Many of the startups did not survive. Nevertheless, this Zerg rush of entrants vastly changed the market. In 1978, 84.8% of the market was held by the old vertically integrated HDD companies. A little over 10 years later, the old guard had just 7.9% share. They were essentially driven out of the market. In the beginning, US firms dominated the industry, but competition came in from abroad. Japanese and European companies did enter the market. The four big Japanese computer makers, Fujitsu, Hitachi, NEC, and Toshiba, originally produced their HDDs for internal use only, but then shifted to an OEM model. However, despite some interesting innovations, they initially failed to make serious headway into the market. That is because the Americans themselves aggressively globalized their manufacturing. In 1984, Seagate began outsourcing the assembly of its HDDs to Singapore. Several other American HDD makers followed. This move was facilitated by the Singapore government's Economic Development Board in one of the most famous cases of Asian industrial policy. By 1990, Singapore was the world's largest producer of HDDs with 55% share of shipments. When Singapore's labor costs also rose, low-value work like assembling the actuator arm holding the read-write head emigrated to other Southeast Asian regions like Malaysia or Thailand. Singaporeans took on new tasks like fabricating the platters or assembling more specialized HDD systems. For information about this, I did a video a long time ago about the history and challenges of Thailand's HDD industry. The Japanese did eventually catch up, outsourcing their production abroad as well. And in the early 2000s, they even captured majority share of the HDD market when Hitachi merged with IBM, before competition and mergers again eroded their advantage away. This intense competition and globalization created enormous benefits for the consumer. From 1976 to 1987, the HDD's data density grew 20 times over. In 1977, a megabyte of data storage cost $560. In 1986, it was $11.89. By 1990, that had fallen to just $6.86, and then 1998, 4.3 cents. But that was a situation that cannot sustain. The technology matured, and companies began exiting the market. There's a whole Wikipedia page about all the defunct hard drive firms and when they exited the market. It's long. The number of HDD firms peaked in 1990 with 66. The next 4 years saw the number of firms cut in half to 33. Failures included companies we never heard of, like Peripheral Memories, Comport, Prairie Tech, Priam, and Tulin. By 1998, there were quote unquote only 16 firms left. Yet, even after that vicious shakeout, the market still had too many players. Between 2006 and 2015, the top 4 HDD vendors had total average market share of just 52.5%. So, 4 more major HDD firms exited the market from 2000 to 2010: Quantum, IBM, Maxtor, and Fujitsu. They were laggards, and with the market maturing, saw no way forward other than to combine to grab size. Even IBM, the HDD's inventor, decided to exit. While they made some money from patent licensing, their own HDD division struggled to gain more than 25% of the market. In 2002, they merged their HDD operations with Hitachi's. A sad end to a storied history. Today, there are 3 major HDD makers in the market: Seagate, Western Digital, and Toshiba. They continue to manage their market share as the HDD fades into history, replaced by new items like solid-state drives. It's unlikely they will ever be totally replaced, but the growth and the innovation is largely gone. Looking at this crazy boom and bust in HDDs, it's interesting to look at how the American firms' aggressive globalization allowed them to retain significant market share in the face of fierce competition from Asia. By the mid-1990s, there were no more HDD assembly factories in the United States, but higher-paying American jobs in R&D, head manufacturing, and gimbals have remained, essentially saved. I do wonder what could have been different to avoid such a brutal knife fight in the industry. Maybe an architectural decision here or there, or maybe that is how it was always fated to play out. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, sign up for the Patreon, and I'll see you guys next time.
Okay, well after this cave spider gets killed, we're gonna take a break. Probably gonna abandon this fort to ruin. There's not really much else to do. Okay. Is there any point in even playing this out? I'm dead. Pretty much dead. Yeah, Moody Dwarf can't find needed item. That's the perfect way to leave it. Yeah, I don't know. Kind of sick of this fort. In the frame rate. In the mess. In the stink. What is all this shit? Chitin. Can you use that like shell? Should have been making shell crafts, I guess. Whoa, what? Oh man. The spearmen? I'm gonna get overrun. For real. Joke's on them, I wanna be at this point. What do I do? Split my forces? Oh my god. Oh yeah, they're getting in. They're getting in big time. This is gonna be bad. Yeah, well, yeah, they're just gonna run amok everywhere. Oh, yeah, I can't even. So screwed. All I can do is watch. Oh, yeah, I literally can't stop them. My military is like nothing at this point. Should I just put random dudes in? Maybe that is what I should do. It's not gonna help, but I feel like I should try anyway. There's only 36 invaders left. This is the thing, the game never ends clean. I kinda want to just die, but feel obligated to play it out. Population is just dropping. Yeah, all these people I just put in can't do anything. I hope something else attacks me. even care anymore. Very clear this. Oh my god. I don't know why I'm bothering. I should just start over. Something else has got to attack me, right? Webbed. Oh. So are all my miners dead? No. Just most of them. Should really just start over. Kind of want... I don't know, it shouldn't be that long before something attacks me. Yeah, like nothing matters anymore. Don't even do this shit. Really? 50. Should be another 29 dwarves on that list. There isn't. What the hell's going on? Must be way more dead dwarves than I know yet. There must be a lot of dwarven children. Oh my god. Yeah, we're going into winter. This'll kill me.
Today I'm going to be servicing a Technics amplifier. This is from 1988 to 90 sort of period. It's a Technics SUV90D. This is a 200 watt amplifier, stereo. It's got a digital input, quite a first for the time. And this is quite a sturdy unit, let me tell you. Built properly. Well, for a Technics amp. Let's get some power into this and get some equipment on. Oh, there's a bit of inrush on that thing, wasn't there? Oh, well, this doesn't look too promising. Well, this isn't responding too favourably. This is a bit crusty, this one here. Oh, this is a bad one. Oh, crikey. Yeah, this is going to need All the front panel taken apart. Such joy. Let's get this lid off for the reveal. God, it's a good lid. Very solid. Perhaps they don't want me to get in it. Look at all that filth in here. Ugh. Yeah. I think it's been in a smoker's home. It's all very yellow. I don't know about a service, this thing needs a blooming bath. Let's get all these knobs off here. Oh, this one's a bit... Oh. A good solid knob that is. Screws on the bottom.
Okay.
Should be about right to get this off now. So, just a little twist, and that's revealed a bit more. Now you're going to have to clear a bit of room up here, I think. Snip that off there. Bit of slack's needed. Some of these boards are held with some bizarre connectors. And if you press them or lift them. No, this is not good. Oh, that's not how they're supposed to come out. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, look at that. This up and down. So down. Oh. I think this has been in there for far too long. I don't know if it's corroded in or what. Oh, another one. I wonder if there's any chance these wires are on plugs. No, that one's not. No, it's around this end. That goes into there. Here we reveal where all the digital stuff goes on. But yeah, this cable. Let's get this dealt with. See, it is on a plug. A plug that works for once. We can disconnect the front panel a bit more. Pull these plugs out this input board. There's still a load of them. That's coming out next. Not a ridiculous amount of screws in this board. That's nice for a change. What does that do for us? Let's keep yanking away. There's one. There's another. I think that's got the front panel loose, maybe. There's not more connections, surely. Yeah, there is. Under there. God. Now will you come out? We're getting there slowly. A few more screws to go. Now it's free. Just got to liberate these boards now. Nothing but a couple screws to take out. I think these are just little plastic clips. Oh, good. Don't break anything, Mark. Same with this board here. I can see. Ah, there it is. Let's get in there. Oh, hello, what's this here? That's... the pot's broken, the casing's actually broke. I've never seen that before. Well, I guess that's got to come out as well. Let's have a look at this board here. These are the push buttons behind this board for selecting the different inputs, and it seemed to all work when I tried it. But okay. There's no buttons on this board. It's hiding underneath. There we go. What a design. Might as well whip these out as well. Not much to see here. These little push switches, they sometimes go a bit bad, so once it's all apart we'll check them out. Quite impressed that none of the buttons fell out. I used to be lucky. Final thing to remove from the front panel is the phono select switch. Because this is a flashy amp, it lets you switch between the moving magnet and moving coil cartridges, for those with more money than sense. So here we are. Most of this amp's troubles are on these boards here. Just these two. Dodgy knobs, dodgy buttons. I'm tempted just to chuck the whole lot in the ultrasonic cleaner. Apart from the pot that's snapped. Get that off. Yeah, this is looking a bit sad, isn't it? A bent shaft on there. I think that might get damaged if I try and put it back. I need to get this apart, so see if I can just prise these little tabs up. Oh, crikey. That's the back off. There's the tracks, which don't look bad at all. And there's the wiper. Wipers, should I say. There's a lot of bits there. They don't look damaged, which is encouraging. We'll see if I have to replace this, which I'm not keen on. I'm wondering as well, is that a C taper? Oh. Well, whilst I'm pondering what to do with that little pot, this is going for a bath. Ooh, I swear down, I will change this cleaning fluid very soon. But not today. Looks more like it. Oh, can I get this in as well? Yes. Stay there. Stay there and be cleaned. Let's get these out of here now. Nice and warm. We'll just get those a rinse off under the tap and then dry them. I've had to think about how to handle this broken potentiometer, and I'm thinking I need to file this little collet down and then probably glue this back in. I think the whole thing, when it's soldered in the circuit board and clamped in, it's all going to hold together anyway, so it doesn't need to be the best, but that's what I'm going to do. You can just see the little tiny little notches in here. I think what they do is push this into there, and then they must use a machine to stake these over. You can see where it's being banged up. There's no way of re-engaging that. Haha, we got it. Yes, put a bit of glue on. What could go wrong? soon it'll sort of run where it needs to. We'll leave that alone for a bit. Just considering my strategy now for cleaning the rest of this up. It really is in a horrible mucky state. I mean, this looks like a cathedral of filth. The way it is built though, it's just not on plugs. There were those horrible plugs that wouldn't come apart, and then we've got all these other wires just directly soldered on. Irritating. So I think I'm going to take the plunge and chuck the main board in the ultrasonic cleaner as well. There's a few things I want to do before I do that. I might want to take the big caps out, because part of that process is to dry it out afterwards, and I don't really want to put those in the oven. It wouldn't do them any good. Yeah, to get this out we've got a bit to do. There's a couple screws here, there, all generally everywhere. Of course it's stuck to the heatsink for the transistors. But the heatsink itself comes off with 1, 2, 3, 4 screws there. Yeah, but also my favourite thing, all these cables. The bloody cable tie on there, making my life difficult. So this goes to the transformer. I don't fancy dragging that around. Power terminals there, and this cable here goes to this panel here, which, to be honest, these have got the speaker select switches. It wouldn't hurt them to go in the cleaner either. We'll leave that on. Oh, then there's cables at the back. Blimey. See how this is moving? I think the whole lot's moving. I need to unscrew these transistors now, so don't drag the weight of the heatsink around and snap their legs off. So if these come loose, yes they have, we can look at unsoldering these wires. I'll just sort of pull these wires off. Come on, soldering iron, do your thing. There's one out. And another. I'm going to just fill these up with fresh solder, and that'll allow me to get a lot more heat into them quickly. So I try and heat the whole lot up in one go. There we go, they've pulled out nice and cleanly. See if I can do that twice. Right, to the caps, I'm breaking out the big guns now. Just let that melt there. Oh, good. I just remember the caps are glued down as well. Just to make life bloody awkward. I'm just going to take the relay out as well. These look plenty posh, don't they? 12,000 microfarad caps. Technics branded. Bet they didn't make them. And I also bet they're still in fine working order after all this time. We'll check that out. At least now we have the board out. Covered in hair and fluff, and to be honest, it stinks somewhat. Smells like an ashtray. Just dust the worst off. Otherwise it'll just float in the top of the stuff. They've got to clean out anyway. Let's set this off sailing. In you go. Murky. I can really start cleaning this chassis up now. We've got old heatsink compound stuck on this, and it's basically turned to like oh, I don't know what to describe it as. Yes, it's gone like window putty. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. I'm going to take this top board out. This is the digital board. I might as well take the whole module out so I can get it nice and clean. There's not much left of this amp. There we go. Very early digital input. Now that's out of the way, I can actually get in and clean this. It is really, really nasty in here. I think I'll get a brush and a bit of foam cleaner, I think. I'll start off just brushing the worst off this. It is leaving behind a bit of a nasty residue. Look at that running off down there. That's filthy. Oh, crap. There used to be a lot of writing on here. It's all gone. What's really weird is it's only taken the writing off this sort of brushed aluminium bit. The plastic fascia, it's still perfectly good. It's not taken that off at all. How strange. And bloody annoying. I'll have to be a bit creative with this one. Whoops. Now got these back out of the ultrasonic cleaning and they're all dried off, looking lovely. Got to put that potentiometer back in. So we've got this that I've already glued back together. It's looking rather neat really. What I do is put the shaft back in. Turns freely like that. Sitting there nicely, then put this metal, whatever it is, this plate back in. There we go. Now the nerve-wracking part is to squeeze this back up without smashing the circuit board. So not too much force at all. Looks pretty good. Flip it over. Well, that's not soldered, is it? There we go. It's always worth checking these over for any loose parts, especially after I've had the ultrasonic clean. That can rattle some loose, and oh yeah, like here, look at that, like wobbly teeth. This is not at all uncommon in Technics equipment. In fact, most of the troubles are down to dry joints. In fact, the more I look at this, the more dry joints I'm seeing. Yeah, they're everywhere. Just all needs a little bit of a touch up. Little crack connections. Still a bit loose, but I think that's just I think the tracks have actually lifted a bit. good idea just to check the continuity around that area. Well, this end's easy. There's that snake round here. Yeah, it's okay. No broken tracks. Just checking this board as well, the push buttons. Check there's nothing untoward on here. This doesn't look too bad at all. Just want to check now that the switches are functioning properly. So what I do is just make sure that they're all, so if they're all pushed in, and just check from this side that we've got the right sort of continuity. Now whether they're bottom pins, so they're 2 pins this side and here, pop them back. Yeah, they're all good. Just now give all these a little tiny bit of light lube. Okay, same on this board here. And this is the push button panel from the front of the amp. So these are all the channel select switches. It'd be a good idea to check that they work okay. Just get the meter on these. I think it's from what can go from corner to corner. And press the button. Oh. Yeah, that's not a good sign, is it? That one's bad. That one's bad. That one's bad. Oh, this doesn't look good. No. They're all shit. Luckily I keep these sort of things in stock. Just a matter of getting them out. New switches. So if I'm going to get them to go in the board, or they're going to fight me. One in. Oh, they're nicely snap into place. Now let's give them a test. Make sure I've not put rubbish switches in. That's better. Much better. That's all the front panel boards working nicely, or they should be. What I can do now is put them back in the front fascia. Just pop a few screws in there. And then this can go in. There's just lamps on here. Nothing too complicated. This just snaps into place. Okay, let's pop a few screws in. Pop this little LED in. clips there, and the volume knob just sits like that. Hang on a minute, I've got to put the button caps on. Oh, got to come out again. Two little buttons. One. Another little button. And a vowel, please, Carol. That's the front panel back together, apart from this board here, but that's still attached to the main board, which I'll do next. Here's the main board, nice and clean. Missing a few parts though, but I did that. Yes, we'll give this a check over, but I want to just check the parts we took out. Especially very curious about these old caps, 12,000 microfarads. Let's see if they still are. These are certainly nice looking. Put the capacitor tester on there, so we'll have positive lead on there, negative lead on there. I'll press the go button. This might take you a while to measure these. Quite a while. Look at that. 12,280 microfarads. Test frequency DC, I'm not surprised. That's a good one. And we'll do the same on here. And they're good as well. Beautiful. The other part we took out was the relay. This is the mute relay. It disconnects the speakers. We'll check that that's good. So this is according to this. It's a 24 volt coil on here. So let's stick 24 volts on. So what have we got here? 1 ohm and 0 ohms. So when we got 1 ohm, why have we got 1 ohm? Let's cycle this a bit. Yeah, 1 ohm. It don't sound bad that, but it is a problem in relation to most speakers being 8 ohms. That's significant. It's a good job I've checked that, isn't it? So, relay is no good in the pile of scrap. Fortunately, they're fairly common. And let's not forget about these parts that fell off earlier. Yes, they need to go back on. I think this is going to be for the dry joints as well. Let's flip it over and have a look. There we go, everybody. There's bound to be some. It is a Technics.
I guess I don't even have masons left to engrave anymore.
Little wiggle test. Oh, straight. Oh, there we go. There's one. Winking at you. Well, quite honest, we are missing some holes where those came from. Those sockets pulled out at the top corner here. And need to desolder all that. Let's get some of these dry joints, like this one. These are always for the dry joints. Now you can put some of these connectors back in. Start with a small one. Watch trim. See if I can do them both at once. Put this new relay in. How's that looking? Nice. Okay, last part to add is put those capacitors back in. Negative to the left. These going to need loads of solder on. These extra pins are just for a bit of mechanical support because the caps are quite heavy on the board. Stops them coming loose. Because we've already seen how Technics parts like to come loose on the board. So the main board is pretty much back together now. It should work pretty well. Not giving this much attention yet. This is the digital audio input board. This has got high frequency digital circuits in, which it would be, hiding behind this tin lid. I happen to know that some of the parts under there run pretty hot as well. It's another favourite place for dry joints. Can't leave it alone. Right, now it's looking how to get this out. I don't think we need to take this top board off, but we do need to take the screws out. Start this end. One out there. Of course, you've got a self-tapper machine screw. Well, Technics, you do like to mix things up, don't you? Well, the whole board's gone a bit wiggly now, so there we go. Comes out. Oh, more of that smelly brown stuff. Right. Let's take those screws out before I completely lose them. It's around here I'd be suspicious of dry joints again. Things have all burnt up. I mean, when I tested it, this did actually work, so probably don't need to go too far into it. Just give it a good old look over. I think we'll just touch up around there. Got the cleaned up chassis ready to put bits back together. First part I want to put in is the heatsink, but I've just noticed something rather unpleasant about this. It's not flat. You can see here there's a raised part around there. It's as if what I think's happened is someone's over tightened this screw here. Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's going to stop the heatsink connecting properly to the transistors, because the back of the transistors, I can show you here, they've got these metal plates on there and they need a nice flat surface, which is exactly not they're not having that here. And how bad is this? I've put a straight edge on it and you can see this it rocks on it. It's definitely not good. Put a feeler gauge under here. That's not good at all. I have to dress that. I've got these aluminium clamps in the vise now, it's a soft metal, so I'm going to hand scrape it with a carbide scraper. Now just get the high spots off. Fortunately, the carbide blades machine really sort of flat and accurate. It's pretty good. Just do it carefully. Painstaking job. Right, this is fixed up now. Let's get it back in the amp chassis. So this just goes back on its little mountings there. Just pop the screws in. Right, now I'm going to put the input boards in whilst it's a bit easier to get to. Always a good idea to check these boards for any broken joints, because the sockets get a lot of abuse, a lot of wiggling and pulling and yanking. Yeah, see this ground one's got a cracked solder joint there. Yeah, we'll touch that up before we put it in. Actually, I might as well do them all when I'm here. Let's get a couple of screws in here. Before I put the main board in, I've got to put new insulators on the heatsink, because the old ones are a bit knackered and crushed, as we saw. So these ones I've got are a little bit smaller. I think they're the exact size of the transistors, so I need to place them quite accurately. But this is a mucky job because we're using this heatsink compound, which just gets everywhere. I try to be very neat and deposit it with a syringe, and sparingly. For a system of little dot, I'll put the first bit on my thumb, just little dots, because you don't need a lot. That's probably too much, to be honest. So I can put it down on there. The good news is it sticks itself quite well. I'll push those in a bit more at the end. Same again on this one. Now, getting a little bit ahead of myself now. Before I start screwing this thing down, I need to solder the cables back in that I unsoldered earlier. One's off the transformer and the speaker connections. And the same with the other cable. Now more heatsink compound. Filthy stuff. See how it all lines up. These long ones in, and on the other side. Let's get a few threads turned in there. That's better. I nearly forgot, I need to put some heatsink compound on these little transistors here, because these have to track the temperature of the heatsink for the to compensate for the gain of the transistors as it all warms up. It's all lined up right. I'm not going to do them up too tightly yet, because I'm going to have a bit of a challenge with these ones because the capacitors are in the way. Let's start that off by hand. Oh, that's threaded in nicely, that has. Just find the start of the thread, sometimes you have to reverse it. There we are. And finally, just wait for the click, there we are. Snip that up. See all that heatsink compound sort of splurge out. Make some room for the front panel to get involved again. I won't make that mistake again or I forget to put the button caps on. You can make sure they're the right way up as well. Bit of a fiddle to get in. See if I can get this cable to stretch all the way here, right from the back panel to the speaker select switch, that is. That's tricky one, that is. I solder that in first, then just push it. I think we're nearly there with this. Get the front panel on. The screws are on the bottom of this, if I recall. Yes. Let's put them all back. Start putting some of these cables back in. Well, I'd say they're going a lot nicer than they come out. Shall we get on with these this time round? Not much space in here. Works better now. It's a small matter of what to do with all these. We know where they came from. Number 5. This is tucked all the way back there. Goes into that board there for the tape player. Plug in J1 and then J2. There's J13 in there and J4. Now's a good time to put the digital module back in. Sits on there. I think it was J11. Must be. Right, got this 3-pin connector here. just leaves this one, if it'll reach. Well, it's looking nice if nothing else. Oh yes. Right, we're at the point now where I need to power it back on. Hope it doesn't blow up. Look, I'm having with this. Okay, nothing's blown up. Relay's engaged, that's protection relay, it's happy. Yeah, seems to work. What I need to do now is check the bias current and just general things about the amp, just make sure I've not disturbed anything after it's been in the ultrasonic cleaner and all that stuff. Now these are the test points for the voltage control amp. One there, and one on there. We've got the left channel test points. Negative connection there, and positive connection here. I've got the 2 meters engaged now. This is the left channel, that's the right channel. Let's get power on. We're shooting for 25 millivolts apparently. And it's there about right. It's not too bad. We'll see how it settles. A little bit of a waiting game now. They're holding about steady about 30 millivolts a piece. I'm tempted to increase the right hand channel a bit. It's a bit on the it's a bit lower than the other one. So we figured it'd be better to have them balanced. Just tweak this one up a bit. They're pretty close to each other now. I'm quite happy with that. Next is to check the current drive amplifier in the same way. Let's move these test leads over. Measure across these resistors. I mean positives on the outside on this one, just to confuse me. We're now looking for about 5 millivolts. I don't think they're too bad at all. That's how warm this amp is. Still stone cold. I'd imagine they get to 5 millivolts. So the range is 4 to 7 millivolts officially. And there we are, 5 millivolts or so. Can't complain at that. I nearly forgot, because this is an early digital amplifier. It's got quite a clunky digital to analog converter, or DAC as they're called. I need to check the offset voltage on that as well. That's got to be really tight, less than 1 millivolt. Put the red lead on there, and the black lead. Then I've got the yellow cable there, and then blue one on there. Then just power this up. What have we got here? 0.16 millivolts and 0.18.
Okay, are we finally gonna die?
Perfect. Now to a signal test. Just put some test leads in. We'll go with the CD input first. My favourite. Come on.
No, we're not gonna die to this.
Look at that. Lovely. Just test some of these controls. There's the balance there. Oh yes. Treble, bass. It's doing stuff. I need to set the phono stage, because that's an extra bit of circuitry in here that you never know if it's working. So I'm going to knock the amplitude right down on here to 5 millivolts on both channels. Amplitude 5 millivolts. Let's turn the volume down a bit on this and put the phono on, whichever channel it was, that one I think. Oh. One of the channels is down. It's not this switch, is it? No.
Fucking stupid dwarves.
Oh god. This amp never stops giving surprises. Yep, supposed to work this thing was. Anyway, the preamp lives on this board down here. So this is where the preamp lives. So the very low signals coming from the ends here go out through this selector cables here, back to a switch, comes back, then it gets processed around here. Could be, oh, when I'm knocking it, it's, oh, there you go. Another wobbly part there, look at that. At least it's on the top. Just touch that up with some solder. And back on with it. That's better. More like it. The look I'm having with this amp, I'm going to definitely check the digital side of it. I think it worked before and I checked it, but you never know. Dry joints keep appearing. So, got my little fibre optic thing. Toslink, I think they call it. Any ideas how I find it though? I don't know. So is it Power Amp Direct? Digital? Oh! Lucky find. There we are. Oh, look at that. Beautiful output. Now you can put the lid on this thing. Finally! What a nuisance. I've got the lid to go on here. Well, that's normally when I finish the job, but there's this outstanding little issue. Can't tell where any of the buttons are. I printed off a big label to put all the markings back on this, so let's see how it goes on. Let's prop this amp up just in a perfect viewing position. Well, I'm quite happy with that. I think it'll do. It's better than no letters, isn't it? Catch you next time.
Okay, here we go. Now I'm gonna die. Actually, I have a decent army. I can't believe I'm going to survive this again. This still isn't gonna kill me, is it? Is there some... Does DF hack have some way to, like, just spawn more monsters to kill me?
Welcome to History for Granite. Join me to explore ancient Egypt. Together, we'll uncover secrets that only stones from antiquity can reveal. Please subscribe to the channel to get notified when new videos are published, and thank you so much for growing the channel. The Great Sphinx of Giza has captured the imaginations of everyone who has laid eyes upon it since it was constructed in, a very long time ago. This oldest surviving megalith statue is truly one of a kind. The attention, mystery, and controversy that the Sphinx attracts never ceases. Throughout history, humans have invoked its projection of power to meet their own needs and desires. Now, full disclosure up front, I don't find the Great Sphinx nearly as interesting as the pyramids of the Old Kingdom. The pyramids are constructed with millions of stones containing movable parts, innovative engineering, and intriguing anomalies. In contrast, the Sphinx is a relatively solid piece of weathering limestone carved out of a hill. It's still a magnificent specimen, 72 meters long and 20 meters tall, with plenty to admire, but it doesn't grab my curiosity quite the same way. However, I can understand why this unique monument receives an oversized amount of attention. After all, there are many pyramids of Egypt, but only one Great Sphinx. When thinking about why the Sphinx captures so much attention, there is an enormous amount of mystery as to what it might represent. This riddle carries over into the question of who built the Sphinx and why so many people are keen to identify a creator. As mentioned in my video about carbon dating the pyramids, the Sphinx cannot be radiocarbon dated because the original monument did not contain mortar with organic material. Furthermore, there are no ancient textual references which associate the Sphinx to a specific Egyptian pharaoh. It has been argued that a now eroded section of the Dream Stela once had a fragment of Khafre's name still visible, but a potential uncontextualized reference from 1,000 years after Khafre, now lost to time, is not a compelling body of evidence. We then must rely upon the context of the Giza Plateau to determine who the Sphinx belonged to. At a first glance, Khafre seems the obvious choice. The Sphinx and its temple are adjacent to Khafre's Valley Temple and the causeway which leads to his pyramid. Indeed, it is the position of Mark Lehner, who wrote his PhD thesis about the archaeology of the Sphinx, that the statue belonged to Khafre. But while it seems likely the Sphinx ended up as part of Khafre's mortuary complex, it's much less clear if the Sphinx or its temple were constructions created during Khafre's reign. There is a tradition of Egyptian pharaohs appropriating sites and artifacts from their predecessors, and this phenomenon is well documented through thousands of years of Egyptian history. The stepped pyramid of Djoser, the first pyramid ever constructed, was found to possess tens of thousands of stone vessels from earlier dynasties beneath it. My favorite example of an Old Kingdom pharaoh exerting power over history is from the 5th dynasty king Unas. He plowed over an enormous tomb, probably belonging to a king of the 2nd dynasty, to build his pyramid and causeway. Furthermore, he stole an inscribed block of Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid, and placed this stone in his burial chamber. The carved relief of Khufu is still visible when illuminated from the side. Look at me, he says. I'm the sun god now. The tradition of appropriating status from earlier pharaohs means caution is warranted before assigning creatorship to something unusual at a king's burial. And it's safe to say the Sphinx and its temple are a very unusual find at a pyramid complex. The Sphinx Temple and Khafre's Valley Temple sit a few meters apart. Their designs do have similarities, such as twin entrances, but either could easily have been constructed to imitate the other. The problem of analyzing these temples is quickly confounded by the Sphinx Temple seeming to have been redesigned during construction and the general consensus that it was never finished. The main evidence the Sphinx Temple remained unfinished is the interior masonry was clad in granite, but the exterior blocks never received this cladding. While almost all the granite has been quarried away, you can always tell where the granite was placed because the softer limestone floors were cut down to seat the harder granite facing. Khafre's adjacent Valley Temple received this final granite exterior. Next comes analyzing the geology of the Sphinx and adjacent temples, which is an even more controversial subject. This channel is history for granite, not history of granite, and so I will refrain from giving an extensive geology lecture. What I can say briefly about the topic is that geologist and independent researcher Colin Reeder has done some of the most impressive and extensive work on the subject. He also has a new book out about the geology of Egyptian landscapes and monuments, which I will link to in the description. It's important to highlight the good work independent researchers are doing. The main point about Reeder's work on the Sphinx enclosure concerns the erosion that is visible most prominently on the western and southern walls. He attributes the deep vertical fissures and rounded faces to high energy runoff from rainfall that would be directed towards the Sphinx enclosure based upon the topography of the Giza Plateau. You don't need to be a geologist to observe the erosional patterns there are distinct from the body of the Sphinx or the blocks in the adjacent temples or the other potential oldest structures that lay exposed on the plateau. I will quickly clarify that other types of erosion are occurring as well, including exfoliation from salt, abrasion from wind, and subsurface moisture wicking. These factors all combine in complex ways, and this is why there is no consensus about what the erosional patterns mean. Colin Reeder's analysis of the runoff patterns in the Sphinx enclosure runs afoul of institutional Egyptology because it means the Sphinx enclosure must have been excavated before the large pyramids of Khufu and Khafre were constructed. When these pharaohs dug into the Giza Plateau to quarry stone directly west of the Sphinx, this would have stopped high energy runoff from the higher plateau being directed towards the Sphinx enclosure. Reeder's conclusion is that therefore the Sphinx was constructed one or a few dynasties earlier than Khufu and Khafre. Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass strongly disagree, and there's a real howler of a line about it from their 2017 book about Giza. They write, quote, that the Sphinx is a creation of the early dynastic period is an extraordinary claim, so it would require extraordinary evidence. End quote. Mind you, this is the same book that writes of the Great Pyramid Queen's Chamber shafts, quote, Hawass believes that there are chambers still hidden inside the pyramid, and that these doors may be the keys that will open these secret rooms. End quote. That's about the most sensational claim you could make about the Great Pyramid, leaving out aliens or magic. No evidence is provided to support such a claim, nor even an explanation of the logic behind the statement. Let me be perfectly clear that asserting the Sphinx might be constructed a few centuries before the 4th dynasty is a mild claim very much in line with a well-documented pattern of Egyptian history. A reason why Hawass and Lehner would call such a claim extraordinary is that it disagrees with their conclusions. From my perspective, the clearest visible evidence to support Colin Reeder's analysis about the erosion pattern on the Sphinx enclosure being driven by high-energy runoff is on the southern wall. You can see how the erosion is somewhat reduced as you travel eastward, and then there is a sudden reduction in erosion where a large fissure cuts across the entire Sphinx and its enclosure. Logically, the fissure would capture a large amount of runoff traveling from the west, thereby reducing the erosion beyond it. It's difficult to model how the topography of the Giza Plateau would direct runoff in antiquity because so much of it has been modified by humans over thousands of years. That subject alone could easily take up a whole video, and I'm not going to dive into it because I don't think anything worthwhile can be concluded with confidence. Lehner and Hawass, in their 2017 book, write a long rebuttal to Colin Reeder, citing that rainfall can still find its way into the Sphinx enclosure. They claim the strongest rainfall they ever witnessed at Giza in 2010 as evidence of ongoing surface erosion. But if in their over 40 years of experience, a foot of standing water in the Sphinx enclosure is the most they can come up with, one could easily interpret this as evidence in Colin Reeder's favor. Hawass and Lehner claim a few generations between Khafre and the end of the Old Kingdom would be sufficient time to produce the erosion we see. But the Sphinx has been cleared of sand for a century in the modern era, and I've not seen pictures that suggest any noticeable runoff erosion occurring in the last 100 years. And let's not forget that the Giza Plateau near the Sphinx has been modified in this time as well, which reduces the usefulness of present-day runoff analysis. One more point from Colin Reeder is how the more durable Member 1 limestone at the bottom of the Sphinx enclosure is less eroded where a cutting was made for the Sphinx temple. This is evidence that most Member 1 erosion in the Sphinx enclosure did not occur between the construction of the Sphinx temple and the present day. You can dive way deeper into the geology by examining the condition of the stones in the Sphinx temple and comparing them to Khafre's Valley Temple and the Sphinx itself. Furthermore, stone and mud brick walls were added to the Sphinx enclosure as early as Thutmose IV, 1,000 years after Khafre, and they seem conspicuously resistant to runoff erosion. But before you think you're sure what the erosion around the Sphinx means, I want to drag you back up to the Giza Plateau to the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Observing the surviving Tura casing stones at the bottom course of the pyramid is a good reference for how difficult this analysis is. A few casing stones are almost perfectly preserved, while others on different sides of the pyramid show stronger yet completely different erosional patterns. And unlike all the variables about the Sphinx and its enclosure, we can be confident these stones are all the same quality of limestone, quarried and installed on the pyramid in short order. There's no way to know how much exposure any particular stone had to the differing elements of nature, so we can see how dramatically small variables add up over thousands of years. Now, taking a step back from the geological evidence, let's look at some contextual anomalies around the Sphinx that offer clues about its origins. For myself and many other researchers, the enormous causeway of Khafre is the prime candidate. This causeway is oversized. The now demolished walls and ceiling covering a walkway between the temples only spanned about half its width. Another critical feature of the causeway is that it was not built out of blocks, but rather what remains of the original Giza Plateau before it was greatly quarried on both sides. The causeway is thus a significant boundary for any construction that might have taken place before Khafre's reign. There is also something highly conspicuous about the path this causeway travels, starting just south of the Sphinx at an oblique angle and leading to what was once the most prominent location on the Giza Plateau, where Khafre's upper temple now resides. Egyptologist Vasil Dobrev believes the Khafre causeway would only have been constructed this way to avoid the Sphinx and its enclosure. He then makes the most modest assertion possible, which is that Khafre's older brother Jedefre built the Sphinx in the small span of time he ruled after the death of Khufu. But even this minuscule adjustment to the age of the Sphinx is something Mark Lehner finds repulsive.
Maybe Jedefre made the Sphinx in honor of his father Khufu. Well, maybe, but there's no proof of that. There's not even any way to test such an idea.
Well, if I were to test the idea that the Khafre Causeway and Valley Temple were constructed to avoid the Sphinx, I'd start by looking at the alignment of other pyramid temples and the connection to their respective causeways. Sure enough, Old Kingdom pharaohs always seemed to center the causeway to each temple as best they could. Not all temples have been found to examine, but even before Khafre, we can see that Khufu's upper temple had its causeway centered even though it intersected at an oblique angle. This pattern shows Khafre's causeway intersecting his temples at their corners is not what would have been considered ideal. If the Sphinx and its temple were not built or planned for their current location, it would have been very easy for Khafre to build his valley temple a bit to the north to maintain symmetry. The upper temple of Khafre is centered to the pyramid itself and also sits upon an elevated natural point on the plateau, so its position would not have been as flexible. The opinion of Mark Lehner is that the location of the temples, causeway, and Sphinx were all part of a master plan for Khafre, and thus the present arrangement was the only way to fit everything together. Lehner claims the Sphinx temple was constructed with blocks primarily quarried from the Sphinx enclosure, thus the two monuments must have been built concurrently. But the stones can only be matched to layers of limestone in the plateau, and those layers span quite beyond the Sphinx enclosure. There are also many stones in the Sphinx temple that must have come from distant sources. It would be wonderful to examine this data ourselves, but Mark Lehner has never published it. He writes in both 2017 and 2020 that he intended to publish this data from 1980, but hasn't gotten around to it. Considering how much difference of opinion there is about the geology in the limestone around the Sphinx, the "just trust me bro" explanation isn't very convincing. Even still, it's likely documentation from over 40 years ago might get misinterpreted when reconstructing it. We are nowhere near a standard of extraordinary evidence. But even if Lehner is correct, and the Sphinx and its temple are the same stones, assigning their origin to Khafre is an entirely separate argument. Lehner believes the Khafre Valley Temple once had an enormous enclosure wall to the north that was later incorporated into the body of the Sphinx Temple, which proves they were contemporary structures. But just because the enclosure wall intersected the Sphinx Temple doesn't mean the enclosure wall had to have been there first. This idea also plays against the argument that the odd arrangement of the causeway and temples was the result of a master plan. And even the shape this original enclosure wall might have taken is conspicuously askew. If there was nothing in the way of the enclosure wall, it would have been an easy way to square off the northern side and return symmetry to the Valley Temple. It's also a straining argument to say the causeway and Valley Temple were built in such an unusual way to accommodate the Sphinx and its temple, which must have followed them, and in case of the Sphinx Temple, built at the very end because it was never finished. That's a lot of accommodation to make for something that was left uncompleted and conspicuously not replicated by any other pharaoh to follow. You don't need to carve a sphinx out of a bedrock hill. Any other pharaoh could have made one quickly by cladding a mound of rubble with Tura limestone and carving the features. Compared to the pyramids, it's not a big job. The more I study the pyramids, the more I appreciate the practicality of their design decisions. It might seem that nothing is less practical than stacking enormous blocks so high, but these constructions would never have been accomplished if shortcuts and efficiency weren't maximized. With that frame of mind, everything on the Giza Plateau would have been made to optimize construction of the pyramids. When looking for an explanation about anything in the necropolis, that seems like the safest place to start. Khafre's Causeway is the largest and most important barrier for any construction paths that could have occurred. The main pyramid quarries for Khufu and Khafre lie directly adjacent to its north and south. It's very difficult to speculate which quarry area was used by Khufu because most evidence of excavation would be removed by Khafre when he digs deeper at a later time. Mark Lehner's pyramid construction model had most of Khufu's pyramid quarry placed south of the Khafre Causeway, with an eastern section of the northern quarry also used. This northern quarry had a few mud seals of Khufu embedded into construction gaps that offer the only textual clue about the area. In this building model, Khafre was just extremely lucky that a small strip of connecting plateau was left between the two quarries, which would later become his causeway. In 2017, when Lehner and Hawass attempt to discredit Colin Reeder's idea about runoff erosion, they realize the North Quarry presents a problem, and they redate it to Khafre, writing, quote, "We now see good reason to believe Khafre's workers made this quarry," end quote. But they provide no explanation for this revised attribution. There's a mountain of inefficiency occurring in Lehner's construction model, particularly with a double enveloping external ramp and the longest, most winding path possible for the heaviest Tura and granite stones that are placed high above the king's chamber. But Mark Lehner isn't an architect nor an engineer, and so perhaps it's unfair to expect him to have worked out all those problems. Architect Jean-Pierre Houdin's construction model for the Great Pyramid is that Khafre's causeway was the original construction ramp, taking a straight path from the harbor with quarries feeding the local limestone from both sides. It wasn't luck that a straight line of bedrock survived the construction of the Great Pyramid, it was integral to the process. Most Egyptologists agree that Khafre's causeway was the construction ramp for his pyramid, based upon its location and size, but Houdin saw it was an optimal path to meet Khufu's needs as well. If Khafre's causeway predates Khafre, that's a very strong indicator he may not be responsible for the origins of the Sphinx. But let's take it a step further and ask ourselves why Khufu might have chosen this location for his Great Pyramid and its construction ramp. The causeway is nice and straight, with a very consistent grade leading to a high point on the plateau. It's not the most direct path to the footprint of the Great Pyramid, but it does account for additional space required for a straight ramp that would rise up on the pyramid's southern side. Might some pre-existing settlement at Giza have informed this construction path? Let's say the Sphinx predates Khufu, and an ancient path leads right past the Sphinx to a nice viewpoint at the top of the Giza Plateau. The ancient causeway gives you a full view of the Sphinx as you walk past it, so that all the fine details that make up the haunch and tail can be seen as you travel to the vista at the top. This is the same journey that countless tourists travel today. When Khufu comes to Giza, it would be most efficient to use a pre-existing roadway for construction. You get the bonus of a godlike statue where workers must begin hauling enormous stones to build an unprecedented monument. That might be a nice motivator to convince your workforce that such a thing could be accomplished. Egyptologist Rainier Stottleman thought Khufu built the Sphinx based upon the style of its Nemez headdress dating to his reign. He was a mentor to both Hawass and Lehner, who writes in 2020 that during a friendly dispute over the matter, Hawass once asked Stottleman, quote, "If Khufu made the Great Sphinx, what was its purpose?" End quote. Without the context of a construction ramp leading from the harbor in front of the Sphinx, this is a great question. The Sphinx as it appears today seems entirely disconnected from the Great Pyramid. But if one is willing to consider the work of architects and geologists outside of Egyptology's inner circle, a satisfying explanation is provided with a construction sequence. Perhaps a better question to ask would be, if Khafre made the Great Sphinx, what was its purpose? Why would Khafre so greatly compromise the layout of his valley temple to accommodate it if the Sphinx and its temple were to be the last constructions left unfinished? When the Khafre causeway was no longer a construction ramp, it gained walls and a ceiling so the Sphinx would no longer be visible from it. Why make an enormous statue where it has lost most of its visibility? When looking at competing ideas about the Sphinx, it becomes clear why Mark Lehner is so adamant in his position. If you grant legitimacy to any alternative idea about the history of Giza during the 4th dynasty, many of his conclusions fall apart. With that said, there's still lots of uncertainty with competing ideas about the Sphinx. There's a ton of research to do, and like Flinders Petrie said, a discovery is not made until the data has been published. Maybe Mark Lehner is correct, and the Great Pyramid was constructed with an inefficient ramp system without exploiting the nearest quarry, serendipitously leaving a strip of plateau for Khafre to use as his causeway, which he would design his valley temple around, planning for the Sphinx and its temple, but never getting around to completing.
Well, maybe, but there's no proof of that. There's not even any way to test such an idea.
When looking back nearly 5,000 years, the chasm of time is always going to leave enormous uncertainty. I present you this model for the Sphinx because I find the story better aligns with my understanding of the pyramids, which are much closer to my heart. Maybe some form of the Sphinx predated Khufu, and he fashioned the headdress or other parts in his own image. Perhaps later Khafre adopted it into his mortuary complex and integrated the temples. This makes sense to me not only because the Egyptian pharaohs appropriated power when convenient, but because you find this pattern throughout history to the present day. A certain individual who formerly had absolute power over the Ministry of Antiquities still insists on giving his lectures right in front of it. When history repeats itself so consistently, it's very hard to be confident about what the origins of the pattern were. We're a long way from understanding the full history of the Sphinx, but we all get the appeal of claiming the power of a lion to make ourselves seem so very important. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end. Please subscribe to the channel to see more of this content. Welcome to History for Granite. Join me to explore ancient Egypt. Please subscribe, and together we'll uncover secrets from the past written in stone. The Old Kingdom pyramids of Egypt are one of the strangest topics to research in the modern day. On one hand, there is a great wealth of physical data that can be observed and collected. On the other hand, the scientific documentation is wildly inconsistent and incomplete. If you're wondering why some of the oldest and most famous man-made structures remain difficult to scrutinize, I don't have a good answer for you. It's a question I ask myself every single day. That's not to say good work hasn't been done. Flinders Petrie's documentation in the late 19th century is of the highest standard and essential for many types of research. But we are in the 21st century now, and technology has advanced far beyond the steel tape Petrie used to record much of his data. Pyramid measurements are useful, but there is so much more we need to see. Evidence remains hidden in the dark. It may have faded to the naked eye, but there are clues on the stones that science might reveal to bring new insights. In this video, we're going to discuss some recent surveys of the pyramids and confront the problems with them. I'm also going to show you a never-before-seen clue in the Grand Gallery, proving the ancient past is within reach if there is a will to go looking for it. When reading accounts of explorers at the pyramids centuries ago, you really develop a respect for how difficult the work was to carry out. These men were risking their lives to study them and enduring the harsh desert with no safety net should something go wrong. While a few of these early explorers were hunting for fame and fortune, the best documentation comes from men who expected no great reward for their painstaking efforts. It was scientific curiosity that drove these men, for it was obvious treasures were long gone, and knowledge of the past was all that could be acquired. But the pyramids are huge, and the ravages of time obscure many details that could easily go unnoticed. Howard Weiss observes this in 1837, writing, quote, "Few travelers have had either leisure or opportunity to examine them minutely, for the hostility of the Arabs appears to have always been formidable, and considerable labor and time were necessary to obtain any satisfactory results." End quote. Weiss was a rare example of a researcher with ample resources, but most others needed to constantly improvise. Astronomer Charles Piazzi Smith even designed and built his own camera for taking some of the earliest photographs of the pyramids in 1865. Photographs from him and others in the late 19th and early 20th centuries are of immense importance because of the subsequent damage that has occurred since they were taken. The pyramids are pitch black inside, and thus photographing their interiors was even more of a challenge with early film photography. Notably, the only surviving images from a century ago are from independent explorers and not institutional Egyptology. Photographs are ideal because they reveal details people may have overlooked in their day. But the precious photos are few and far between, and thus written documentation remains the primary resource for research before the mid-20th century. There is, however, a long and unfortunate history of researchers in Egyptology never formally publishing their findings. Whether it's procrastination, unexpected death, or simply lacking an incentive to publish, it's a tradition that goes back centuries. Flinders Petrie understood the great cost of this habit, writing, quote, "It is a golden principle to let each year see the publication of the year's work in any research, but the writer places himself thus at the disadvantage of showing how his information may have been defective or his views requiring change as year after year goes on. Such a course, however, is the honest and most useful, as half a loaf is better than no bread." End quote. Egyptologist Margaret Drower elaborates on this point, writing, quote, Too many excavators sit for years on their material, hoping to cross every T and elucidate every puzzle before they commit themselves to print, while the memory of their fieldwork fades, costs of production rise, and the world waits for the information only they can provide. End quote. Sometimes this failure to publish means the information is lost forever. This happened at Djedefre's pyramid, which we may never truly understand because of it. However, before the 21st century, if work was written down and never published, it could sometimes be recovered at a later time. Nathaniel Davison was the first person to scientifically record the height of each course on the Great Pyramid in 1765, and he even drew a diagram of the summit, which has changed in the past centuries. Davison never published any of his research, but his diaries still exist, and thus I can show his diagram of the summit. This drawing has never been reproduced in any Egyptology publication. That's the great advantage of data recorded in ink and film. It can survive even if its creators do not distribute it. And that's really all the old documentation is: stacks of paper bound into books and diaries made available at a reasonable price. The modern data is different. It's private, and it's made of electronic information stored in proprietary formats in computers. There's no reason to believe this data will survive even a few decades if it's not widely distributed, let alone a few centuries, such as Davison's journals buried in the special collections at Stanford University. I'm speaking in particular of the data collected by laser scanning, drone photogrammetry, and other similar technologies. So why is this data being collected if it's not being made available for scientific research? The reason is that the companies with the access and funding to carry out such studies aren't doing it as a scientific endeavor. Their purpose is to profit from selling TV documentaries, social media advertising campaigns, and other related business ventures. In 2019, there was a 6-part cable TV documentary series called Pyramids Solving the Mystery. In this series, drone photogrammetry is constantly hailed as the ultimate breakthrough for studying the monuments. If you're wondering why that is, I'll let Egyptologist Mark Lehner explain in this quote from the show. Quote, "I would encourage all of you, do not wait, go out today and buy the photogrammetry." End quote. Subtle, isn't it? For all the flack YouTube gets, at least the creators here must disclose when the words they speak are bought and paid for. Traditional media has no such ethical constraints. Back to Mark Lehner's sales pitch, I personally am an outlier in that there's nothing I'd rather do than go out today and buy the photogrammetry. But I can't do this, because it's not for sale, and it never was. The business strategy of selling photogrammetry was abandoned by the producers, probably because there is no market for such a product. It's the same reason that people wait in long lines to see the Mona Lisa in person, yet nobody hangs a perfectly affordable reproduction in their home. The only people interested in such data are researchers like me, but we can never gain access if it's left to rot on private servers. And let's be very clear, the data will quickly become useless and forgotten as technology evolves beyond the systems used to process and store it. Ironically, the sales pitch from these companies capturing the imagery is that they are preserving the past. Anyone with a basic understanding of digital history knows that computer data ages quickly, costs money to maintain, and is likely to disappear forever if it's not widely distributed. In other words, the message of preservation is either naive or simply marketing. I'm sure producers of related TV shows would argue that the show itself is the documentation, and that the experts who evaluated the data at the time give the relevant analysis. But that's simply not how proper research is done. A few paid-for experts giving their opinions at one moment in time is nearly worthless. If the data can't be independently evaluated in the future, then it's not even approaching the scientific method. Here's an example of how unreliable the results are from these TV show-produced studies. 2 documentaries made only 5 years apart used high-tech scanning equipment to measure parameters of the bent pyramid. Both studies were interested in determining if the bent pyramid's unique shape was the result of construction problems, or if it was instead an intentional design. Here is the conclusion reached by the show using photogrammetry analysis. Quote, "Facing the risk of collapse due to deep cracks, the builders decide to be practical. They take an unusual and important decision. Despite their idea of building a triangular pyramid, they change their plans." End quote. Now compare this to the conclusion reached by the show using laser scanning.
The laser scan data has convinced Steve that the top of the bent pyramid, so long thought to be a hasty rescue mission, is actually a deliberate feature.
The exact opposite conclusion is reached by different experts using different technologies. So, who are we to believe? The answer, of course, is neither. Without the ability to look at the data, there is no reason to assume either production is accurate in its assessments. This is frustrating because all the effort to capture this data is wasted. Consequently, the TV show Science on the Pyramids isn't science at all, it's merely entertainment. It's easy to laugh at shows like Ancient Aliens for being fantastical speculations, but shows with real Egyptologists will make ridiculous assertions as well. Here is Egyptologist Meredith Brand commenting on the Red Pyramid.
Looking around, all of the stones are the same color and they look really similar. Except for over here on this wall, there's a stone that's darker than the stones around it. Could there be another chamber behind it? I wonder if Snefer's mummy is still in the Red Pyramid.
Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. Wrong show. I have no problem with entertainment or even speculations with mediocre evidence to support them. But these productions claim to be preserving cultural heritage, which is simply not true. If nothing is shared, then nothing is preserved, and these productions are just a fancier version of the street vendors you find lurking about ancient Egyptian sites. There is also a huge opportunity cost with for-profit infotainment organizations conducting archaeological research. In recent years, the World Scan Project was granted access to document the well shaft of the Great Pyramid, a feature of the monument which has never been properly recorded. They made it clear to me via email that they have no intention of publishing their data. When a different organization later requested access to the well shaft, Egypt's ministry denied them on the basis that the World Scan Project had recently gone inside. The situation is truly ridiculous. I should contrast this bad behavior with the work done at real academic organizations, most notably Harvard University under the direction of Peter Manwelian. His Egyptology department made a huge effort to publish many documents and photos on their website, and I encourage you to visit. There's also a related virtual 3D tour inside the Great Pyramid, put together by educators and viewable for free. Manwelian has even made hundreds of 3D